Hi everybody, this video will be a bit different with respect to the usual videos I publish here. It's not a tutorial. I want to discuss more in general about an interesting topic, no code versus low code, and why I think many people have a wrong perception on it. I'm Eugenio Tacchini, founder of DaDaBIK. DaDaBIK was one of the very first no-code, low-code web platforms, first released in 2001 and still here. So I've been in the no-code, low-code world for more than 20 years, not only as founder of DaDaBIK, I've also used as an end user several other platforms. As you probably know, the offer of no-code, low-code platforms has literally exploded in the last years. And online you can find many discussions about this topic. For example, on Reddit there are two separated subreddits, a no-code subreddit and a low-code subreddit. What I often see is, on one side, some confusion on the meaning of the terms. Especially low code lends itself to misunderstandings. On the other side, I often see that people classify these platforms into two very distinct categories. No-code platforms, low-code platforms. This is sometimes a very artificial classification, a false dichotomy. It certainly is a false dichotomy for DaDaBIK and also for some other platforms. So during this video, I will try to explain with examples why I think these two approaches can be perfectly integrated and why you should follow this integration philosophy when you develop your applications. Before starting, let me remind you, if you're interested in the no-code, low-code world, please subscribe this channel and hit the notification bell to be notified about new videos and lives. So, what I'm going to discuss. First, what is coding? If we need to talk about no coding and low coding, we have to define what is coding first, right? You are probably saying, I know it, I don't need that. Well, it's probably obvious for most of you, but for non-coders who are exploring this no-code world, this is not so obvious, because literally some of them never coded in their lives. But more in general, we need a coding definition to understand that when we are evaluating no-code, low-code platforms, we probably shouldn't use a formal definition. It's not very useful. You will see toward the end of this video what I'm talking about. Then we will define, using real examples, what is no-code, what is low-code. Then I'll try to answer this question: why does low code even exist? If you're not a coder and you're exploring this world for the first time, you may wonder why low code platforms exist, if apparently we can use no code platforms. Finally, we will discuss this false, in my opinion, no code versus low code dichotomy, and the no-code, low-code integration. So, what is coding? As I said, well, the general definition is pretty obvious, but should we use this definition when we talk about no-code, low-code? We'll answer this question later. For the moment, let's focus on the definition. So, this is one of the very first results I got on Google. If I search computer programming definition, I think it's a good one. Keep in mind this definition because we will need it later. And I want to give you concrete examples. So this is a very simple program in PHP. Of course, it could be in any other language that takes two values submitted by a form, sum them, and print the result. So this is coding, okay? And here I kept these two parts separated on purpose you see the HTML code we need to write the form. HTML is not a programming language like PHP. Technically, it's just a markup language. We use it to define the content in a web page and describe the content to the browser. Saying this is a form, this is a paragraph, here you have a picture, things like that. And this is this little program in action. All right, next step. What is no-code? A no-code platform, as the name suggests, allows to create applications without writing code. You don't need to know PHP or JavaScript or Python. You don't need to know a programming language to use these platforms. So the creation process typically consists in configuring some parameters or using a graphical user interface. For example, you can drag and drop some components into the application you are creating. So again, let me show you an example. This is a CRM application I have created with DaDaBIK. Let's create a new customer. There is a form, I can fill it with the data, submit the form, and the application will register a new customer in the database. Okay? Well, I didn't need to write HTML code to create this customer's form. DaDaBIK created it automatically according to the customer's table I created. And let me fill it with some random data. Okay, I got a validation error because the email is not valid. Again, I did not write the PHP, Python, or JavaScript code needed to validate the email. But since I set the content type for this field as email, DaDaBIK validates it. These are two very simple examples of no code. We could go further because the entire CRUD, create, read, update, delete, CRUD, the entire CRUD set of features you see in this application has been created automatically according to the schema of a table and according to my configuration parameters. Okay, so no code. But let me show how the configuration works. Okay. So here is the form configurator. From here I can configure the form you saw before in great detail. So for example, first name. This is my form. I can change the label here. I can set the content, and as I said, according to the content there is a validation. There are a lot of parameters. I can make it bigger, for example. Okay, I can change the field type. At the moment it's a text field. Maybe I need a text area. Okay, for longer text. I can do many things. Let me show something else. Company field. This is a so-called lookup field, for example. The content of this menu depends on another table, the company's table. This is a select single lookup field in DaDaBIK. So both the form and part of the behavior of the application when I submit the form itself has been defined visually using the form configurator. And the reason why I have a customer's form is that I created a customer's table here. Customers. In the data section, but you can create it also from outside DaDaBIK with all the fields and the field types. For this table, again, no code, DaDaBIK created the classic CRUD forms that then I configured in the form configurator. Edit, delete, insert, generate charts. Everything is coming, let's say, for free, automatically, no code. So we have seen a little example of no code. Let's talk about low code now. What is low code? A low code platform reduces the amount of code you need to write. So you have to write some code, but typically much less respect to the amount of code you write using a traditional programming approach. With the traditional programming approach, I mean you choose your programming language, for example PHP or Python, and you write all the code you need to formalize your algorithm, to describe the steps the computer should take. With low code, you need to write a small fraction of the code. How this is possible? Well, I would say there are two different approaches. The first one, I call it framework approach. For example, if you take Laravel, well, some people consider it a low-code platform, and I cannot disagree. You write code. You build your entire application writing code and commands. But Laravel is a framework that works on the top of PHP, and it saves code and time. For example, Laravel has a built-in authentication feature, so you can implement a login system in your application without writing all the code you would need to write using pure and simple PHP. Okay? That was the first approach. Second approach. This is the DaDaBIK approach. You build part of the application with a visual, no-code approach, and a very small part of the application coding. Could be very small, could be big, depending on how complex your application is. You typically need to write only the code needed to cover some specific features of your application or workflow. Even for this, I want to give you a concrete example, but let me ask an additional question. You may wonder, why does low code even exist? If we have no-code platforms, why we should code or low code? It is just for fun or what? The point, as you can imagine, is that by using a low-code platform, you can create more sophisticated and tailored applications. But again, what does more sophisticated mean? Okay, now I show you the example that at the same time hopefully shows you what is low coding concretely and why we need it. Why no code sometimes is not enough. Okay, let's create a new customer, and let's say that email is a required field. Okay, so if I miss it, the application produces an error. Setting a field as required is a no-code thing. I just need to set it in form configurator. So form configurator, customers, email, and email at the moment is required. I can set it to no, and if I go back here, now email is not required. All right? And the possibility to make a form field required is so common in a typical web application and so simple to express, it's a Boolean value, true, false, that probably all the no-code tools provide this possibility with simple settings. Now, let's make a crazy example. Let's say that the fact the email is required or not in our application is based on the weather. If in this moment is raining in Firenze, Florence, then email is required, otherwise it's not. Does this rule make sense? Absolutely not. However, I want to use this weird example to prove that it's impossible for a no-code platform to have built-in, ready to use, without coding, all possible scenarios everyone may need in their applications. So to implement this very peculiar need, we need some code. Let me show the code. In DaDaBIK, we call this custom required function. Basically, we need to write here in PHP, in this particular file called custom required functions.php, we need to write the logic we want to use to express our rule. And this is our logic. If you know PHP, this code is very simple. If you don't, let me explain it in a few words. So basically here, I'm calling the API of openweathermap.org, passing the coordinates of Florence, and I get as an answer a so-called associative array containing some information about the weather. In particular, weather 0 main. I don't want to go into much technical details here. I just want to show you how things work in general. Contain the main description of the weather. Okay, so it could be clear, clouds, rain, something like that. So here I'm saying, because these custom required functions need to return a Boolean value, true or false. True, it means true means the field is required. False, of course, it is not. So here I'm saying that if the weather is rain, then email is required. Otherwise, it's not. Okay, so this is my function. Then I have to tell the name of the function. Remember the name of the function, which is I mean, you can choose your own name. By default, it has to start with DaDaBIK underscore. Then we have to tell DaDaBIK in the form configurator that this field has a custom required function here. So here we search Dada. Here we go. DaDaBIK require customer email and save. Okay, so now the fact that this field is required is well, depends not on this particular setting, but on our function. All right, so let's try it. Let's reload this. So apparently it's not raining in Firenze right now because the email is not required. So maybe we can change this clouds and see. Refresh. Okay, now it's required. It means that right now it's raining in Firenze, so the email needs to be required. Let me show something else. Another example of low code. Look at this field, the sales. We create a new sale, amount, let's say 10, and amount plus taxes, as you can see, has been automatically computed. This is a so-called calculated field. It takes the value here and adds 22% VAT tax. Okay, that's the rule for this calculated field. To get this behavior, you have to define the field as calculated in DaDaBIK, as usual in the form configurator, and provide, again, the PHP code to use for the calculation. This is the code. So this is another custom function we created. This time we saved the function in the calculated fields function.php file. This is the code I have used. One line of code. Why am I showing you this? At the beginning of the video, we defined what is coding. Is this coding? Well, literally, yes, it is. It's PHP code. It's a very, very simple program, if you want. It's so simple that probably if you see this in an Excel formula, you would never call this coding. But since it's in PHP, that is a programming language, you think it is. What is my point? Sometimes, depending on the context, you change your perception on the complexity of what you need to do. If I tell you you have to write PHP code just to compute price plus taxes, you probably think, oh, that's too much, I don't want to code for that. This should be offered as a no-code function. But if you think about it, even if you don't know anything about PHP or about programming in general, this is something you can learn in 10, 20 seconds, right? And let's explain it. So basically, $params is an array, a so-called array, containing the values you have in the form. So $params amount contains this value, 10 in this case. And you return, or better, this calculated field function returns amount multiplied by 1.22 to compute amount plus taxes. So every time I change this, automatically this is going to change. So very, very simple. The code can be very simple, one line, like in this case. It can be very complicated as well. It's standard PHP code. You have an input as arguments, the values of your form, and you can do whatever you want. You can read data from a database, you can call external API, you can create the most complex algorithm to compute the tax value. It's up to you. If you want, you can see more low coding in action in the part 2 of a tutorial about creating a CRM with DaDaBIK. You should see the link now, and I will put it in the description as well. I started with a complete no-code CRM app in part 1, and then I added custom validation functions, calculated fields, and conditional fields. So here we need to stop because there are two important things to clarify, and now you can really understand them. When you are evaluating a no-code platform, you should first understand how far you can go with no-code. How many typical use cases are codified in the platform so that you can just point and click or configure some parameters to get what you need. Second, if you need some code, how difficult is the coding part? Does the platform allow to integrate your own custom code, and how? Can you use a pretty standard language such as PHP or JavaScript, or you need to use the platform proprietary language? These are all questions you should answer. If you have to use a platform proprietary language, not only is yet another language you have to learn, that you probably need only on that platform, but also it's for sure very limited respect to PHP, JavaScript, or Python. And how about integration? That's another important point. Make sure that the code you write can be fully integrated with the platform you are using, but at the same time separated from the core code of the platform. Why? Because you don't want to change the core code of the platform. Otherwise, when you need to upgrade your platform, your custom code will be lost. In DaDaBIK, all the custom code you write lives in custom function files that are completely separated from the DaDaBIK core code. Those files will not be touched when you will upgrade DaDaBIK. So when a new version of DaDaBIK is out, you upgrade it. The upgrade procedure automatically replaces all the core code files with the new ones, but of course your application will be still there. So what you set in form configurator, your permissions, and so on and so forth. But also the code you wrote will remain untouched. You can even keep your code in a Git repository if you want. And finally, we can answer our main question. As I said, in some cases, no-code versus low-code platforms is just a false dichotomy. And it surely is with DaDaBIK and with some other platforms as well. In fact, with DaDaBIK you can combine both approaches. The transition from no-code to low-code is very gradual. You build your app without coding. If you need something that is not covered by the no-code capabilities, you add your code on the top of the no-code app you built. This approach has benefits for both coders and non-coders. If you are a coder, you can take advantage of the no-code capabilities of DaDaBIK to manage the boring, repetitive tasks and focus on the part of coding that really matters. If you are not a coder, you can still create a quite good and complete app without coding. Check my Build a CRM tutorial if you don't trust me. And then, if you want to improve it, you can learn step by step how to add simple code parts to your app. First simple and then more sophisticated. But you can also delegate the low-code part to a coder, right? So you build no code, the core of the app, and then you ask someone else to refine it. With DaDaBIK, the custom code is standard PHP, JavaScript, and SQL. Many developers can code in these languages, so it is easy to hire someone if you need it. So depending on how complex your application is, you might be able to build it without any coding, no code, or for more complex features, more complex workflows, drastically reducing the amount of code you need to write. Low code. We consider both the no-code step required and the low-code step optional as part of the development process. So this is pretty much the DaDaBIK philosophy. What it guides is development. The no-code capabilities of DaDaBIK I think are already very good, but I will try to expand them more and more until a certain limit. Because if using no code, the development of a feature requires more time or is more difficult than doing it by coding, well, then it's not worth it. As I said, we can't include all the possible scenarios, workflows in the no-code space. Let me explain it again in other words. If we try to do that, at some point we would have constructs that are so many and so complex that we are basically building another programming language. So to avoid programming, you create a pseudo language that is as complex at some point as a standard programming language. This doesn't make sense. Too much abstraction is useless and can be dangerous as well. Okay, I think that's it for today. Let me know what you think, if you agree with me, if you think I'm missing something. It's a topic I've been thinking about for a long time, a topic I like to discuss, because basically it's related to how we are going to develop software in the next 10, 20 years, right? But anyway, again, that's it for today, so see you next time. Ciao!